excited about these church catalogs, not because I like documents, and not because I like paper and officiality and organization, although that is important, and I do like it sometimes. But I like this because we had to do this. We started getting enough people where people kept asking, well, how do I get in touch with that person? And I want to tell that person something, but I don't know how to get a hold of them. And so we realized, well, we need to have this. We had enough information and enough people that we had to put something like this together so that we could communicate together. And this is one of the greatest tools for us to help us be the church that God is calling us to be. We can't just be a church individually. We need to be a church together. And this is one of those tools that helps us be a church together. Because if I have a question, I'm going to think, well, I need to ask somebody I can find how to get a hold of them. If I want to invite somebody to something, I can find out. If I want to celebrate somebody's birthday, I can find out when their birthday is. If I want to celebrate somebody's anniversary, at least some of them are in here. This is a great tool. So, interesting thing that happened with our church catalog. It was put together this week, and about Thursday or so, it was all printed, all stapled, all folded, in a nice stack, ready to go. And then we discovered that there was an error. The error had to do with several people in the church who did not, over the last, month that we've had it out, available for editing, who did not go and edit their information. And those people's names are Carl, Kimberly, William, and Madeline. And our information was wrong. Our zip code was wrong, and our street was wrong. And we thought, well, now that can't go out. So you'll find that there are stickers in your catalog over all 4 of our names with the correct information that we put on last night. There are days in my life that I have, a couple days maybe, where I thought I have actually been wise. And these last couple days are not some of those days. I am not that wise, but I think you would agree with me that our world needs wise people. Our schools need wise people. Our classrooms need wise students. Our government needs wise leaders. Our workplaces need wise bosses and wise workers. Our families need wise people in them. Events need wise coordinators. We need wise people, because if we don't have wise people, the problems don't get solved in the right way. The big questions don't get asked. We don't move forward. We don't grow. All kinds of things don't work if we don't have wise people. Our world needs wise people. And the Bible is totally on board with this. Proverbs, in particular, the book that talks more about wisdom than any other book in the Bible, talks about the need for wise people. And Proverbs basically takes this view that the world has always needed wise people. Not just now in 2016, not just thousands of years ago when Proverbs was written, but all the time. The world needs wise people. So I like Proverbs' response. If we need wise people, then Proverbs basically says, go get wisdom. Just go get it. Find it. Check out chapter 2. This is what it says. It's in your bulletin or it's up on the screen. We're just going to read it section by section. It responds to this idea, well, just go get wisdom. It says, my child, listen to what I say and treasure my commands. Tune your ears to wisdom and concentrate on understanding. Cry out for insight and ask for understanding. Search for them as you would for silver. Seek them like hidden treasure. It's saying, go with all of yourself. Invest everything. Search for it. Look for it. Find it at all costs. Look at all the ways that it's talking about that. It says, give all of ourselves, all of our effort, all of our time into finding wisdom. Because we need to get wisdom. So if wisdom is that needed, if wisdom is that valuable, if wisdom is that important, and if we can all go find it, then how do we get it? Where do we start? Where do we go? So we have a little video to watch with some people's perspective on wisdom. So let's check out what these folks have to say about wisdom. So watch this with me.
to me, isn't an answer anyway. Wisdom is a question. It's like your mother saying, where have you been to this time of night? The question was the answer. She didn't want you to tell her.
Wisdom is about experience, which hopefully would include risk-taking and being somewhat adventurous.
He is more blessed to give than to receive, because in giving, although it doesn't seem so, you receive.
You don't stop doing things because you get old. You get old because you stop doing things.
I get sillier as I get older, so I don't know what wisdom means.
It's awfully sad that with our clever brain, capable of taking us to the moon, we seem to have lost wisdom. And that's the wisdom of the indigenous people, who would make a major decision based on how will this decision affect our people 7 generations ahead.
It's not about brains. It's not about the accumulation of knowledge. It's about being decent.
Okay, Alright, so do those people agree on where to find wisdom? I would say no. That clip goes on for about another hour, and I didn't watch the whole thing, but it's more and more of the same thing. Lots of ideas about where wisdom starts, what it is, where it comes from, how we get it. And we need to know where to start if we're going to find wisdom. I mean, if we're supposed to go and get wisdom, we need to have a place to start. We need some directions. We need some way to begin looking for wisdom. Interestingly, even though there's lots of these different perspectives on wisdom and what it is and where to get it, wisdom is incredibly popular, and more popular now, I think, in some cases than it's ever been. Wisdom used to be a very philosophical kind of thing where the philosophers looked for wisdom. Well, now it's shifted, and it's in the psychology world. Psychologists are now focusing on wisdom. Check out this graph. This is a graph about the number of publications that are publishing articles in the world of psychology on wisdom. So these are articles from psychology journals written on wisdom. And you see that in the last 25 years or so, this has gone up dramatically. The number of articles that are written on this is huge, because people in this industry and in this part of the world of psychology, they're looking for wisdom. And they're realizing we can study this. We can try to figure it out. We can run tests. And we can analyze people. And we can try to find wisdom. I mean, we're looking for a place to start in finding wisdom. And there are so many different directions to go in trying to find wisdom. But if it's really this valuable, and if it's really this important that the world needs to be filled with wise people, we need a place to start. And at least Proverbs would say, I got a place to start. So here's Proverbs' set of directions. It's the next section in this passage. It says, then you will understand what it means to fear the Lord, and you will gain knowledge of God. For the Lord grants wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He grants a treasure of common sense to the honest. He is a shield to those who walk with integrity. He guards the paths of the just and protects those who are faithful to him. First part of the passage makes a connection between wisdom and fearing God. Specifically, it says that as we look for wisdom, we will understand more of what it means to fear the Lord. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read the phrase, fear the Lord, that makes me stop, because I don't say fear the Lord in my normal life. I say follow the Lord, or follow God, or love God, or obey God sometimes, but I don't say fear the Lord. I mean, fear the Lord is a very different kind of thing. It's a very Old Testament thing. It has a different idea about it. And I'm sure it doesn't mean spooky or scary sorts of things, but it's not a phrase that I tend to use all the time. Fearing the Lord. And it actually appears a bunch of times, mostly in the Psalms and in Proverbs, and here's a few of them. See if we get some sort of connection here. Job, the fear of the Lord is true wisdom. Psalm 111, fear of the Lord is the foundation of true wisdom. Proverbs, fear of the Lord is the foundation of true knowledge. Proverbs, fear of the Lord lengthens one's life. I think you get the picture, right? Fearing God leads to wisdom and knowledge and understanding. So, what's this fear all about. It's very Old Testament. In fact, the fear of the Lord, that phrase, never appears anywhere in the New Testament. It's only Old Testament. So fear of the Lord or fearing God, it appears many times in the Old Testament, and the Old Testament only. And as you can guess, it has to do with being in awe of God, or revering God, or respecting God, or honoring God. So it's a healthy kind of fear. Like you fear your parents, or you fear somebody in authority. I mean, it's a good fear, because that person is loving, but you need to fear them so that we can obey and follow. One person said that fear is a wholesome dread of displeasing God. It's that I don't want to displease this God who loves. I want to follow and obey. So we marvel first at God being God, and then we just have this dread about displeasing God. There's a healthy fear there. My high school biology teacher, his name was Mr. K. Actually, his last name was not K. His last name was Kirijanis, but nobody could pronounce it, so we all called him Mr. K. And Mr. K was very tall, taller than probably any student in the school. He was very thin, very fit. He was a runner, and he had very long legs. So if you sat at the back of the room, I think it only took him 2 strides to get to your desk. He was that quick and that tall. He was dark-haired and somewhat dark-skinned. He was Greek, as you can guess, by Kirijanis. And he had the voice. I mean, the deep voice. He had a Bud Werner voice. I mean, he could make it deeper, especially when he was not happy. He would make it very deep, and you knew that Mr. K was talking to you. Mr. K was also the one who volunteered to break up any fight that happened at the school. It didn't matter if it was across campus, he was there. If it happened outside his room, he was there. He was always the guy to break up the fight. And I don't think he ever said anything. He just appeared, and people ran away. I mean, he was that kind of guy. And my friends and I, we feared Mr. K. I mean, for a good reason. We feared this guy. But he was a great teacher. I mean, he taught us, for 2 years, most of us were in his class, he taught us these great complex things, about biology and science. And many of the kids from those classes went on into majors in college that relate to science. And I would credit him because he was an incredible teacher and he's inspired us in those kinds of ways. We feared him. We didn't want to displease him. But we also knew it was because he loved us. It was a good and a healthy kind of a fear that we had from Mr. K. Fearing God is a good thing because it reminds us where we belong. God is good and God is great, and we are not. And we need to fear God as we follow God. So what does the verse say? Where does wisdom come from? Wisdom comes from fearing God. The Lord is the one who grants wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. Why would God ever grant wisdom to people who don't fear God? God grants wisdom to people who honor God, who respect God, who are in awe of God, who have this healthy dread of not wanting to displease God. God grants wisdom as we're in this understanding, this relationship in a sense of fearing God. I noticed something else in this verse, and it has to do with the simple phrase of fearing the Lord. It's not the fear part, but it's the Lord part. If you were here back in, I think it was February, we looked at some passage that made a distinction between where our Bibles say Lord in all capital letters and Lord in lowercase letters. And the difference is in the name that it uses for God. It was not this passage that we looked at, it was a different one. But the same thing applies. Because when I read this, it was Lord in all capital letters. And whenever that appears in the Bible, I've always thought, well, that's strange. Why does the Bible put it in all capital letters? In Proverbs, almost every mention of Lord is all capital letters. Which is unusual, because most of the other Old Testament books, they have this mixture of lowercase Lord and uppercase Lord, and it's all over the place. Proverbs is almost only uppercase Lord. Interesting, because the lowercase Lord refers to the name that people gave God, like in our culture we would just say God. Any religion says God. It's a name for God. And it refers to the powerful, the mighty, the eternal, this big kind of concept of God. And that was one of God's names. It was God. But the all capital letter, Lord, is the personal name that God gave for himself. Like when God, strangely enough, introduced himself to people, God said, "Hi, my name is God. What is your name?" Not exactly, but that's sort of what God did. It was a personal sort of introduction. And when God did that, God said, "My name is Yahweh." And that was God's personal name that people could call God. That's the uppercase capital letter Lord. And every place in Proverbs where Lord is mentioned, it's this uppercase Lord. So connect that with this fear idea, that fear of the personal Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Not fear of this transcendent, powerful, mighty, big, amazing God, which is true, but fear of this God who is so personal and that we have a relationship with. And what if wisdom emerges out of a relationship with God? I think there's some truth in that. Because what does God want most? He wants a relationship with us. And when God tells us where wisdom comes from, it comes from the Lord, but it comes from a relationship with the Lord. It doesn't just come in a moment. It doesn't just come because all of a sudden we're wise. It emerges out of this life and this relationship that we have with God. If we're trying to draw a picture of what getting wisdom looks like, we could draw it like this. Starting point, learn, grow, try, seek, find, got wisdom. But I don't think that's what Proverbs is talking about. I think maybe this is a different way, but I think this might be more of it. We start and we look and we seek and we find Godward, and we keep on seeking and finding. Because there's no end point. There's no moment at which, I'm finally wise. Wisdom emerges constantly out of a relationship with God. And there's no end point to it. There's no schedule to it. There's no moment that, finally we're wise and we're done. It's an ongoing thing that happens in a relationship with God. Because the Lord grants wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. I think wisdom is actually a lot like friendships. In friendships, you don't just meet somebody and say, "Hi, we're friends." I mean, maybe some people do, and kids are so much better at making friends than adults. It's amazing, and they're so much quicker. But even for kids, it takes time to make friends. It doesn't just click in a second. We have to learn from each other, and we find out what's similar about each other, and we spend time together, and we try to figure out, well, what do you like to do? And what do I like to do? And let's hang out, and let's go here, and can you come over? And let's do something together. Let's spend some time together. And all of a sudden, we say, hey, wait a minute. You're my friend. And that's wisdom. It emerges out of this relationship that happens with God. And over time, in a relationship with God, we might discover, hey, wait a minute, that was a wise moment. I'm not wise, but that was a wise moment. God did a wise thing. And years later, that was a wise thing. I never saw that coming. It emerges out of this relationship that we might be able to have with God. So, once we begin to see wisdom and it emerges, what happens? I mean, what changes once there's wisdom? The next section in Proverbs addresses that one. Then you will understand what is right, just, and fair, and you will find the right way to go. For wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will fill you with joy. Wise choices will watch over you. Understanding will keep you safe. Wisdom will save you from evil people, for those whose words are twisted. Is the wisdom that this passage talks about, this type of wisdom, is this just spiritual, church, faith, Sunday morning kind of wisdom? No, I mean, this is like real life, my decisions, my choices, the challenges I have, the things I'm dealing with. I'm trying to figure out what's right. I'm trying to figure out what's wrong. I mean, this is daily life kind of wisdom. I mean, the wisdom that the Bible talks about, I love that it's not just super holy, super spiritual kind of wisdom. I mean, this is in the holy and the not so holy and everything kind of life. This is wisdom about everything that we deal with and everything that we go through. The big difference is that wisdom comes from the Lord. So Proverbs is, Old Testament. If we flipped almost all the way to the end of the New Testament, we find in James that James talks about wisdom. And a fairly famous verse, he says, if anybody lacks wisdom, ask God for it. That's exactly what Proverbs is talking about. If we lack wisdom, ask God. Be in a relationship with God. Live in that relationship. What happens? Wisdom emerges in time. When? I don't know. But it happens. It emerges out of this relationship with God. So, where could God be leading you to develop wisdom? For what purpose? In what setting? Where is there a situation, a relationship, an event, a place, a future thing happening where wisdom is needed? James would say, if you think that's coming, then ask God for the wisdom. And out of this relationship between now and then, God will supply it. So what wisdom goal might you have? What goal for wisdom might be out there? A place, a relationship, people, a challenge, a question, an anxious thing, you don't know how it's going to work out. Where do we need to ask God for wisdom? I am sure every one of us has at least one, if not 38, places where we need to ask God for wisdom. I believe one of the things that Proverbs teaches us is that God answers and God gives wisdom when we ask. But it's in the context of this relationship that God wants to have with us. So would you join me and let's pray for those things.